Recently, I was contacted by a source with some very compelling information about what's happening in the Hedera ecosystem this year, more specifically next month. And I was a little bit shocked when I received this information. And you know, we're gonna dive into it. There's quite a bit to say about it. I don't want to be sensationalist, but you know, as it relates to this type of stuff, I have people reach out to me all the time with, you know, certain bits of information that's salacious or exciting or useful. Many of those people want to remain anonymous, and to be honest, I just don't share most of it just because I don't feel it's either credible or not very useful, or maybe you put it out there and people kind of take it and run with it and it kind of gets a little out of control. This is a little different, and I kind of want to try something today, which I think people will find interesting. A little bit of insider info. Always nice on a Wednesday. Yeah, so let's get into it. We got a big show this week. Let's get into it.
And we're live. You're listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiast Show.
Hosted by Brandon Davenport, aka itsbrandond.
Make sure you get some bevies. Stay hydrated. Does anyone else find the Twitter Spaces video like awkward in some way? I haven't heard any complaints about it. Like, it seems pretty smooth for people. I don't know if people on desktop can see it though. I think it's only people on mobile. We'll fix that soon though. I got big plans. All right. It is episode 118 of the Hashgraph Enthusiast Show. It is Wednesday, March 27th. Hashgraph Enthusiast Show is live every Wednesday on X Spaces at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Support the show, all that good stuff. Yeah, big show today. Got a lot to talk about. Let's just actually dive into it real quick. So, Karate Combat has really, I think they've got 65,000 new users recently. So like when we look at a use case on the Hedera network, Karate Combat is like definitely making waves, and is one of those use cases I think that's like truly onboarding new users into the Hedera ecosystem. The app is smooth, everything like that. They're getting, you know, BitBoy to fight, you know, people and stuff. So there's a lot of very interesting stuff happening at Karate Combat, but I just wanted to quickly share a little video clip with people that are watching the video version. I guess we're going to be doing live video soon. That's not just the phone looking at me up at an angle. But what I'm going to show here is just like, you know, this is basically a fight between two fighters. But the crazy thing is on the actual in the pit, you've got Galaxy, you've got Dead Pixels. You'll see the Dead Pixels ghost right there, and you got Saucer Swap too. So like this is a crazy use case that, you know, has had kind of these major partnerships, and is in a category that I think is huge for the Web3 space. So I mean, huge shout out to Karate Combat, and I think it was kind of surreal for a lot of people in the ecosystem to like see, you know, Dead Pixels and stuff like that in that context, which I thought was great. Another very exciting update from the ecosystem is relating to Neuron. We've talked about Neuron extensively on the show, but they shared an update yesterday. Basically, you know, what Neuron is doing is they're developing a system in which you can kind of like track air traffic, airplanes, drones, all those different types of things. Just because the space right now is so outdated and it's really hard to know exactly where everything is in the air. And then you think about other use cases and it's like, oh, you could do delivery drivers, you could do all sorts of different things. But basically what it requires is a lot of sensors. And so Neuron just posted an update that there is a lot of airports. They got a backlog of airports that are waiting for these sensors. So to me, it really feels like the Neuron use case. And I think a lot of people are excited about this use case, but it does feel like, Neuron is starting to get some really solid footing for this year. And I think that, they're going to be interesting ones to watch. I remember recently on the show, we talked about that they're probably going to have a token release and like all these different types of things. So Neuron is very interesting. Initially, it felt very like old industry, aviation, Internet of Things, that type of stuff. But it's becoming like more and more of a Web3 use case as we go. So that's very exciting. Also from Dovu, they're launching a new office in Dubai. They mentioned that their initiatives in India with the government of India's goal to retire 20 million combustion vehicles, and leveraging Dovu to issue those credits. That's going really well. And so Dovu said, hey, we need to open an office to build and manage those opportunities in the area. So turns out they're going to be building and opening, well, not building, but opening their new office in Dubai just in time for token 2049. So that's crazy. Yet another kind of, Hedera use case that's been around for quite a bit that is, really focused on a huge industry. Again, scaling even further. A little bit of bummer news too was, well, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but KuCoin, which is a major exchange, basically the headline is the U.S. government indicts crypto exchange KuCoin and two of its founders on criminal charges, citing a multi-billion-dollar criminal conspiracy. We've seen these headlines before. Also today, the SEC made some moves in regards to the Coinbase case. So too much to unpack there on this show, but just putting on people's radar that the Gary and the SEC are, still in the game. They're still rocking and rolling. And I think that there's going to be a lot more coming in that regard. So I'd stay frosty. Good news though is, in the conversations in the ecosystem around hardware wallets, people are still waiting on ledger support for HBAR and HTS assets and stuff like that. There's just this big vacuum in the Hedera ecosystem when it comes to hardware wallets. There just isn't a variety. There isn't a product that supports the network natively, including the token service and stuff. So we've been following a long time Citadel Wallet. I had Andy from Citadel on the show last year, a hardware wallet in the Hedera ecosystem. The big news today is they've just become FCC and CE compliant, which allows the device to be sold in most major markets. That includes, the USA, Canada, Europe, UK, Australia. And they want to expand into other markets. But this is a big stepping stone because, making hardware is not easy, especially if you want to sell it at a large scale. So I think that this move from Citadel is a big one. And this moves them closer to production. And so, I know that they did the initial, the INO and all that kind of stuff on Headstarter. So I think that this is a huge step. I don't want to put any timelines on it, but it definitely feels like, this is definitely something happening this year. They're saying that they're going to start, manufacturing wallets in early April. So, weeks from now. And, just think about that, a bootstrapped startup in the Hedera ecosystem that will be manufacturing hardware wallets with full network support in mass. So, did not have that in my bingo cards in 2020, but yet here we are. That's pretty wild. So huge shout out to Citadel Wallet. That's some big news. I also wanted to share a clip that I thought was interesting from All In Crypto. All In Crypto is, a news source and commentator on kind of the broader crypto market. And it's nice sometimes to watch content from those folks, because I think that they have some fresh perspectives on Hedera. I think sometimes, and I actually talked about this with King Solomon on the show, like maybe it wasn't last week, but the week before, of just like, when you research a space so much and you're so hyper aware and so in the loop of like everything going on, sometimes it's hard to take an objective look at stuff and actually kind of see. It's almost like knowing too much in a way can like color your opinion on what's happening. So sometimes it's like, for me, it's important to kind of go like, well, what are people that maybe don't know a ton or know as much as I do per se about Hedera? What are they thinking about Hedera? What's their take? And what I've found and what I get the sense of in general is, I think that because we know so much in this ecosystem, it's easy, especially also too, when you're surrounded by people that know so much, it's not difficult to become pessimistic, or it's not difficult to become critical. But I think that when you're watching content from or speaking with people that aren't like strictly inside the Hedera ecosystem and maybe don't know so much, I found it to be, surprisingly positive. I think that in my experience this year, I've found that it almost feels like people outside of Hedera, observing Hedera, looking into investing, are like more bullish in a lot of ways than people inside of Hedera. And again, I think it's just because, the bear market did a number on everybody. And I think that, again, when you're so steeped in this information and so steeped in the network, it can definitely color your opinion. But this is a clip, just a short, 2-minute clip that I wanted to play from All In Crypto. Again, just like a general influencer, has really great knowledge of Hedera, but isn't like every day, all day, kind of like going deep into this ecosystem as some of us may do. And just kind of like a good high level take that I think is worth unpacking. So let's take a quick peek at this real quick. Let's listen in.
From a tokenomic point of view. And we always see, I think, naive comments, something that you should bet on, and you should have, they'll have made.
Hold on, I skipped the, I did that thing again where I pressed, I have a setup for changing my camera feeds. Click the wrong button. Here we go.
Fundamentally and from a tokenomic point of view. And we always see, I think, naive comments in regards to people talking about Hedera's tokenomics. You want to talk about tokenomics? Look at Dogecoin's tokenomics. That is inflationary to the tune of trillions of tokens. And it was one of the best performing assets of 2021. And that's all due to the madness of crowds, Elon Musk. So sit tight is the real message of this video. We wanted to kind of do a video on this because I always notice when we have these periods of sideways action or volatility, there's a real level of frustration that kind of arises, and I don't think that needs to be there. You're making your time in the cryptocurrency space and as an investor harder for yourself than you need to, and you clearly don't have a broader plan and confidence in that plan and understanding in regards to where something is going. You are only going to derive that from doing your own research, not just taking what YouTubers say as gospel, because the vast majority of YouTube content out there, believe you me, is not of any sort of a high caliber, and that's just my own opinion on that. And you clearly don't understand or haven't looked into where the price is at, where it's going, and have some sort of a relative understanding of markets and how they work. Don't take what I'm saying, go and look at those Hedera price predictions that we've done, and go and do some research into this project, and you'll come to the same conclusion that I have. The last thing for me to do, guys, is actually just show you this view. I'm currently in the Scottish Highlands.
So that's basically, I didn't want to like share the meat and potatoes of his video because I'd encourage people to go check it out. It'll be linked in the show notes on hashgraph.news, the website for the show. But basically the take is like, think bigger, have some patience. And I mean, it's painful. That's kind of what the situation is here, is like, that's painful for people in this ecosystem to hear. Like, if we have to hear, be patient one more time, this community is going to lose their minds. But when you step outside of Hedera and you maybe put yourself in the shoes of someone kind of looking at Hedera and going, this looks interesting. when it's fresh, it's really exciting. So basically for me is like the takeaway here is people that look at Hedera for the first time aren't going to see it the way I do right now. They're going to see it maybe the way I saw it when I first invested, which was like all starry-eyed. Wow, you know, how incredible is this? You know, this is incredible. This is a new technology. And my trajectories, you know, and I think a lot of our trajectories has been, you know, frustrating in some ways, like anyone investing in any altcoin in 2021 or 2022 or 2023, which is like, there has been this time in the market of accumulation. So everyone's kind of been in the same boat. So I think that for me, it's like keeping in mind when people check out Hedera for the first time, they're going to be doing it with like fresh eyes. They're not going to have a lot of the baggage we've picked up. So I'm trying to remember that. I'm trying to remember that people coming into this ecosystem are not going to be looking at it the same way I do. But good video from All in Crypto. Shout out to him. His content's always great. I wanted to move on to just talking about HIP 657, which is mutable metadata on Hedera. And we have some really interesting news on that. Basically, the headline here is it is coming. You know, I heard that HIP 657 is dropping mid-April. So in about maybe 2 weeks, maybe a little over that. And that's going to be massive. So like a quick refresh is, and again, this is from this is from Swirlds. So basically, and I tweeted that out, you know, last week or something. So a lot of people aren't aware, but basically, with HIP 657, what this means is when you mint an NFT, you're going to be able to change the metadata after the fact. So like one of the things on Hedera that's great is when you mint an NFT, it's provably immutable. You can never change it, which a lot of use cases for NFTs need to have. Obviously, you don't want your NFT changed after the fact, after you buy it. But what if you do, right? If you think of NFTs outside of just the art context, it's like maybe an NFT is a carbon offset credit, or maybe it's a, you know, an identity, or maybe it's something that might have to change down the road. There isn't a mechanism currently on Hedera that would allow you to change an NFT later on, right? Change the metadata tied to that NFT. HIP 657 does that. And so many people in the ecosystem, there's so many builders that have been waiting for this since last fall. A lot of them are in the music space. And so this HIP is going to unlock so much innovation in the Hedera ecosystem, because when you can change an NFT after the fact, you can just think of all the different use cases that's going to unlock. So that's coming, as long as there's no tech hiccups, that's coming mid-April. So if you are kind of working on, you know, a use case on Hedera that you need to be able to change an NFT, change the image on it, or change information on it, or whatever it may be, after it's minted, and update it in people's wallets effectively. And be able to do that without burning or smart contracts or whatever. This is what you've been waiting for, and it's coming in just a few weeks if everything holds up. So I think that, you know, now's the time to start putting some pen to paper. If you're building something, now's the time to think about getting some stuff live and experimenting. I don't know when that HIP is going to be available on mainnet. I don't know if it's on testnet yet or what have you, but I know it's coming and people are stoked about it. I asked a question to the Hedera community recently, which was like, what predictions do you have for April? And there was some good feedback. I'll just quickly dive into some of it. There was like some bummer takes too, which, you know, I get, but basically I was asking, you know, what's everyone's predictions for the Hedera ecosystem in April, you know, big or small? Everybody's saying, you know, a new governing council member, which is understandable, as we saw, we saw quite a few people high up in the Hedera ecosystem, including, you know, Charles, the CEO of Hedera, or the president of Hedera, Shane, the CEO of HBAR Foundation, and who else was it? Christian, I think, when I had him on the show. But basically, there's a high confidence that, the governing council could be filled this year. So obviously, it's safe to say, a governing council member a month is realistic. So sure, I think that a lot of people are thinking, April we'll see a new governing council member. We've already seen 3 this year. BitGo, Hitachi, and Mondelez. So who knows? And there's just like a general sentiment that April's going to be a big month. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Another big thing that people are talking about is central exchange listings for HTS tokens and also USDC, right? We only have $8 million of USDC on Hedera. And when we look at centralized exchanges, the problem is that they don't have that built-in support for the Hedera token service, right? For those assets on the Hedera network. So lots of workarounds have to be done. Assets have to be wrapped, et cetera, et cetera. And so a few episodes ago, I think it was episode 115 or 116, I talked about Saucer Swap's comments on their recent community call. And basically they were talking about some really great progress when it came to rolling out HTS support on some major centralized exchanges. So I think that that's a big thing, is like people in the ecosystem are really on the same page now when it comes to blockers and pain points to Hedera's growth. And a big one is accessibility, making HBAR accessible to everybody. And in a lot of ways, that means getting it on centralized exchanges. But further than that is accessibility of things like Sauce or Dovu or Jam or Galaxy or Pack or whatever other kind of tokens you want to have, be able to also have those available on centralized exchanges. Because right now it's just not. So the only way to get some of these tokens is to get HBAR, then get it into, a Hedera wallet, and then, go to a DEX. And there's so many steps for someone to just get a particular token. So that's huge. So that's a big thing that people are talking about. People are talking about new use cases, all this kind of stuff, but also people are sharing, again, like I was talking about, a bit of that pessimistic, attitude in some regards to what HBAR has been doing as an asset over the last few months, but then also just in general, kind of, I think that a lot of recent drama and controversy and debate and this and that in the ecosystem, I think, has burned some people out. The bear market's burned people out. So I do, like, when I ask a question like that, sometimes it's like, I do get a sentiment sometimes that there is a bit of a little bit of a bummer vibe happening, but it is what it is. But to be honest, who really cares? Because I have some very interesting information to share. We'll dive into it. I posted a tweet like an hour ago, kind of letting people know that, I definitely get tips all the time for different news or information. Many of those people want to remain anonymous. So that's what it is in this case. And it's stuff that, like, honestly, I usually don't share any of that stuff, but in this case, it's different, and I wanted to share it with the community. So we'll chat about that. Real quick though, I just wanted to give a big shout out to supporters of the show. Literally could not do it without people sending HBAR to a wallet. It allows me to buy equipment like this, upgrade the show, dedicate the time to doing the research, getting the breadcrumbs, getting the news, all that kind of stuff. And just continually improving and growing the show. It's like a direct result of support from the show. And I'm just consistently blown away by how people support the show. One thing I am bummed out about is, I loved being able to, there was a product in the ecosystem from LedgerWorks. I whine about this on the show a lot, called LedgerWorks Sentry. And it was great because I'd put in my email address and it would just send me an email anytime there was an action on an account. So I'd basically subscribe it to the Hashgraph enthusiast wallet. And so basically when anyone sent a contribution to the show, I'd screenshot the email and share it on X and kind of be like, hey, shout out to this person for supporting the show. And it was cool because it like removed their wallet address and it removed the amount that they donated, and it only showed kind of like the memo. So it was nice. Like people would leave supportive memos and that and stuff like that. So I love sharing that. So you probably have seen, like, I haven't been really sharing recent contributions to the show, literally just because it's, you know, I've been busy and it was just so easy before, but they don't have that service anymore. So I'll have to find a replacement or something. But huge shout out to people, supporters of the show. Love and appreciate you all, especially everyone listening on X. We got a good crew here. Yeah, I see some good folks listening. Milan, Tyler, what's going on? Paul, Tamara, good stuff. Lots of good people. Lots of new faces too, which is great. I love seeing that. Okay, so let's dive into it. I want to share something juicy with you guys, an anonymous tip with some big updates. Now, to preamble this, you know, I think that it's important to remember that, you know, like I said, I get a lot of tips, you know, regarding news or information in the ecosystem, whether you want to call it like insider info or whatever it might be. You know, and 95% of it, like, you know, I don't share just because, you know, especially if it's someone who wants to remain anonymous. It's like the name of the show is the credibility, right? I kind of have to put the name of the show in the line just because I can't speak to the credibility of a source a lot of times. So I don't think I've ever really done something like this on the show before. And most of these folks like just don't wish to be identified. So the other side to it is like, if a source isn't like, if I can't verify it, or if it's like not super credible or whatever it may be, sometimes there's just no point. I just don't think it's useful. And to be like really clear, like I never, ever share information that people tell me in confidence. This is only stuff that people will give me explicit written permission to share information on the show, like very clear, you know, and may also make it clear how they want to be identified, all that kind of stuff. So there's just standard like journalistic, you know, protocols that you do with this kind of stuff. And it's not like this is not earth shattering. But yeah, this is one instance where I can put the show's name, you know, behind the credibility of the source. And I've been given permission to share this information, but under the condition the source remains anonymous. So that's basically it. So what's going on? Well, basically, so the source that I have is a high-ranking individual within the Hedera ecosystem, and I verified their identity. I know their identity. They're highly credible. I will not be sharing any information about the source, so don't ask me. So basically, what's the scoop? What's the information? So here's the info, and I've tried to like organize it in a way that makes sense. And you know, you know, for valid reasons, the source was unable to go into like extreme detail, but it's information that I think is useful enough that, you know, this time I'm doing something a little different. So basically what we know, or what I know, is the source says there is a substantial pipeline for Hedera in April, including a very institutional access point. So what does that mean? Well, what I've been able to piece together is an institutional access point in the context of crypto, or a crypto token, refers to a platform or service or gateway that allows institutional investors, you know, maybe think of a bank or a hedge fund or a financial service firm or whatever, to participate in the cryptocurrency market. And the key thing here is like, this isn't like a regular exchange or whatever. It is like as it's described, an institutional access point is designed to meet like regulatory, security, operational needs of institutional investors. So it's like very stringent. And in this climate now where like literally just this week, or literally just yesterday, we saw the SEC banging down on KuCoin, you can understand that institutional investors are really wanting to get into this industry, into crypto, and are slowly running out of options. And so now we're starting to see institutional access points for Bitcoin, for Ethereum in kind of new ways, especially with these ETFs. And then as it comes to HBAR specifically, as it comes to Hedera specifically, that's what this source is communicating to me, is this is something specific to Hedera arriving in April. So that's exciting. And that's kind of part of that pipeline. The other thing is, the source did give clear indication that they believe the items in this April pipeline could have an impact on price, essentially kind of attesting to their significance. And I mean, we've seen stuff like this before. We've seen announcements in the past affect price, like we saw recently, the Hashgraph Association Saudi news, and we saw with Drop and FedNow. We saw that impact HBAR price directly. So the implication here from the source is essentially this April pipeline, including the institutional access point, is substantial enough to do that. That's what I've inferred from our conversation. Now, the other piece to this is the sources said there is a monster use case dropping in Q3, if all stays on schedule. That was all the detail provided. And I mean, it's very in line with it. It doesn't feel like breaking news that there's information like this, but what it does do is I hope it provides the community some kind of confluence to other information we've had, and kind of other things that we've seen folks talk about. And so this is a kind of a confirmation of that yes, Q3, there is a monster use case dropping. I think the main question immediately in my mind is, okay, so I think about a monster use case. Obviously, the direct analog to that is Atma.io, right? The use case that's driving, throughput on the network, right? The definition of a monster use case so far is, 1500 TPS. So the question in my mind when it comes to this, the information the source gave me is, is this going to be a subsidized use case? Or is this going to be the first major use case that is kind of, powered under its own steam? That's going to be very interesting to see. So that was another thing. And I think that was kind of really the main piece of information. And then as well, over the conversation, the source expressed an overall kind of positive sentiment, that there has been a lot of change at the top levels of the ecosystem. And I think that we're all kind of sensing that. I think that that's a top of mind conversation that a lot of people have been having in the Hedera community and in the ecosystem, of feeling like there's a lot of change, feeling like there's a lot of pivoting. And I think that sometimes it feels off the mark, but I do think that, there's a lot of change happening. And so I think that what this does is it in some ways confirms that at the top, there is definitely positive change happening. And that was definitely something that was, directly kind of touched on. So really that's the information here. And again, this is a source that I've, that I know the identity of, that I've verified, and that I deem highly, highly credible. Not going to be sharing any other info about the source, but quick summary of the information shared is there is a very substantial pipeline for April, including a very institutional access point, which is very exciting to me, because even though it may not be directly related to a governing council thing or a use case thing, when we say institutional access point, we're talking about some big stuff. And, an April pipeline with other announcements coming as well. That's what the source implied as well. It's like collectively enough to impact price. It was very evident that was what they were implying. And again, the source said there is a monster use case dropping in Q3 if all stays on schedule. It again wasn't clear what kind of use case it would be, or what it was related to. They, they have valid reasons to be unable to provide further details, but I'm just, I'm just deeming the source highly credible. And so that's really kind of the drop here. And we're going to have to see what other people say, what other information we can corroborate. But like I said, this stuff happens frequently. People reach out to me either anonymously or, just directly with information or, insider info, whatever it may be. And I just really don't share it usually just because, again, like I can't maybe verify it or I just don't deem it like super useful. But just this is different. And I would just say, remember that this is for everybody. This is an anonymous source. So I would say only trust this information as much as you trust the show. There's nothing else that I can do to lend to the credibility. All you can do is kind of take the show and do your own due diligence. And again, like I said before, I really don't do this kind of thing normally. This is just an extenuating circumstance. So take that as you will. My thoughts are, it's funny. Like when I name these shows, I do it usually on a Monday and I try to think about what the theme of the week is. And this week was, should we be thinking bigger? And when I get tips like this, it definitely kind of makes me feel that way. And it's not just this situation, it's also just stuff that I've been seeing, stuff that we've, been seeing in the public that's launching, and also dialogue, debates, everything. And I think that that's the general theme for me, is the need to think bigger. I think that for me, bear market's been tough. The last few years have been tough, I think, for a lot of people just staying alive in Web3. We've seen a lot of great projects not make it. We've seen a lot of businesses fail. And we've seen, major global banks fail and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's been a lot that's happened. And a lot of people have had to, whether you're an investor or a builder, you've had to build up this callous and this attitude to survive. And I think that is going to create a lot of opportunity cost for people going into this new phase of the industry when really things feel like they're kind of opening up and you don't want to be closed, right? And so I think that the thing that kind of struck me is like, we got to think bigger. And even a few things in my personal life have kind of got me thinking that way. And so that was just sitting around kind of trying to think of what to call the show. That's kind of, I think, a big takeaway here. The other thing is we should expect some curveballs. It's clear to me, even just from like public information, not just from, the tip shared with me, is like, there are just big changes happening in the ecosystem. And I don't know if folks at the top are really aware, are really sure of what's exactly going to happen. I think that's exciting. I think that's fresh. I think that we've been operating in the Hedera ecosystem very much as kind of like on the rail, right? And it's enterprise, we're the adults in the room. There's a plan, but as we've seen, it's like right now, especially this year, we're learning more and more that like, how much is that worth? We don't know. What's generating revenue for the network? Meme coins and degen stuff. I'm pretty sure, Saucer Swap potentially makes almost as much or just as much or more money than Hedera. And that's the reality of it, that retail is driving adoption and innovation. There is enterprise stuff that's so important, but I think there's just going to be curveballs. I think if you still have the same investment thesis on Hedera that you had years ago, you're setting yourself up for major pain. I think that these curveballs are going to be good ones. I don't think it's the case of curveballs where it's like, oh no. I think it's a curveball of like, oh no. I don't know how else to describe it. I think that we run the risk of not being ready for those. Again, not thinking bigger, being too closed off. I think that you got to be ready for those because the curveballs are sometimes where the opportunity lies. And I think that also, as I was kind of thinking about this and just reflecting also on just like, again, all the public information out there and what's happened this year, and then extrapolating on that and kind of being like what could happen, but also like what has happened over the last years, like what has been that historical growth trajectory. And what I kind of reminded myself was we definitely for sure run the risk of overestimating what Hedera's trajectory could look like as a network, right? And I think that's a conversation we're having in the community right now. I think that's the overall theme is don't overestimate Hedera. We might be overestimating Hedera. We need to temper expectations. We need to be realistic. We need to, we need to be aware of this stuff. So I think that that's been a big message that's been talked about in the ecosystem is being careful to not overestimate, Hedera's trajectory. But the other thing is there's also an equal risk of underestimating Hedera's trajectory in a very real way. And because we just don't have access to a lot of information, like literally we don't have access to a lot of this insider information. And so we often just are using what's publicly available. And sometimes that means, waiting 90 days for for Hedera meeting minutes and stuff like that. So I think that was, as I was kind of deliberating with myself on how to present this info that was shared with me by this source, I think that that's what this is about for me is it's just maybe a reminder that as much as we're being cautious to not overestimate Hedera's trajectory, and maybe for sure it's been overestimated in the past, I think that it's also fair to say that things change. And there has been big change that's happened at the top of this ecosystem and community in recent months. And I think that, there is a real risk of underestimating Hedera's trajectory that we should always kind of be aware of. So that's kind of my takeaways from this information shared. We're going to move on to some news stories. Please don't ask me about who the source is. Not interested in talking about that. More than happy to, have chats about the information that was shared with me and that I just kind of shared on the show. And very curious to see what other people think about it, if they've heard similar things and what other stuff we can get to the bottom of. I know Hedera is a very resourceful research group. So I love stuff like this, and I'm happy I was able to share it. Please don't expect stuff like this on the show regularly. And please don't expect to share tips with me and have me share it on the show. It's just not something I usually do because most of those are not that compelling and not that useful. This one was, so I shared it. And like I said, trust the information as much as you trust the show. That's kind of what this is about. Now, I love, Tamara says, don't overestimate and don't underestimate Hedera's trajectory. Got it. Yeah, I know it definitely sounds like it doesn't make sense, but that's really where it is. Like, that's really what this is about. Like, that's what all of this is about, is trying to find yourself at that perfect spot, right? Of like being realistic and on the nose, but also not like underestimating. It's the most difficult thing to do. And I've found that right now the ecosystem, rightfully so, and the community, rightfully so, has formed a very kind of strong bias more to the underestimate side, which I think is healthy, because I think that for a fair period of time, there was a strong bias to overestimating Hedera's trajectory. And I think that the pendulum's kind of swung the other way. And so I just think it's just being aware of that. It's not like it's never going to be perfect. No one's ever going to kind of be right there, but just I'm being aware of it, that the pendulum's swinging on that. And so I'm being conscious for myself of like, okay, but there are some crazy things that can happen, some curveballs. But anyways, enough of that. Let's talk about a new use case coming to Hedera that I literally just learned about right before starting the show, and I've done zero research on it. And I'm going to have a quick sip of my kombucha. I thought this was going to be a crazy flavor because it's blue, but this is like literally just the unflavored variety. I have no idea why the flavored versions are like different colors and they decided to make the fun color the like plain one. I don't know. Anyways, it's blue. Abu Dai. Everyone grab a bevy, have a drink of water, stay hydrated, and we'll dive into our next story. God, I can't get over how horrible the Twitter Spaces video angle is. Cask Capital. So we haven't seen like a ton of crossover. This is something that I found fascinating. So one of the favorite examples for a use case that Leemon and Mance would talk about back in the day is like you can tokenize stuff on Hedera, and they would always say you could tokenize a fancy bottle of wine or something. And like we know that alcohol is a huge industry, and we've never kind of like, there's been a few maybe kind of use cases or, you know, parallel type things, but we've never actually seen kind of like a tokenized alcohol type project as far as I'm concerned, like diving into Hedera. And so this one here, which is Cask Capital, does seem very interesting to me. And they basically send out a post on LinkedIn which says Cask Capital looks forward to showing how tokenization on Hedera will revolutionize the whiskey investment market. Stay tuned for our upcoming marketplace launch. Hashtag blockchain, RWA, alternative assets. So this was kind of surprising. I didn't really see this exact use case coming. And it appears to be a marketplace for whiskey and investors in whiskey. I imagine it may be something along the lines of, let's say there's a, $7,000 bottle of whiskey. Maybe you fractionalize that NFT and you can own, an eighth bottle of that whiskey, and it will be custodied somewhere in some kind of safekeeping. So you don't actually have to have it in your house, and you could then sell it later on in the open market. So there's physical, I had a conversation with someone that was doing like a physical art gallery, art marketplace, and they were looking to build on Hedera. I had a conversation with them at the Hedera booth in Denver last month or this month. And it's such a hard thing to do when you're custodying physical assets. Maybe it's changing hands, and then you bring in like NFTs into that. What does that all mean? How does that work? This feels like a very fresh approach at that, and they're doing a marketplace. So I'm going to be watching that one. Curious also to see who has thoughts on Cask Capital, or if anyone knows anybody from them. I'm curious. Yeah, very interesting stuff. Speaking of interesting stuff, BlackRock. So BlackRock, what do I mean when I say BlackRock? And as folks know, BlackRock is a major player in the world. They own, a good chunk of the world. And they also own a lot of Bitcoin, and they're doing Bitcoin ETF stuff and this and that. They also want to do actual tokenized products. So not just custodying Bitcoin and doing an ETF, but actually operating tokenized assets on the blockchain or on the Hashgraph. And this kind of grabbed my attention in a big way. So there was an article published in Blockworks, and the article was essentially BlackRock messed up. And they clearly want to take crypto seriously. Like Larry Fink and BlackRock, as much as we hate them and, not a huge fan. I'm generally not a huge fan of, this influx of of these institutions and stuff into crypto so quickly and so early, but it is what it is. I mean, number go up, good stuff. And BlackRock really wants to get in deeper. They want to actually be doing stuff on the blockchain, which is exciting. Now, it's taken years for BlackRock to start working with Ethereum, and it's effectively just been ruined. So what happened is exactly as Leemon, the co-founder of Hedera, described in years past, which is a huge aspect of blockchain technology is a risk factor for businesses. And the aspect is you open a wallet, and if anybody is aware of your wallet address, they can send anything into your wallet, which means they can send any form of token, NFT, whatever it may be. If your wallet can hold it, they can send it. You don't have controls to prevent certain assets from entering your wallet out of the box. There might be a third-party tool or something, but the network itself doesn't offer that functionality. There isn't a network besides Hedera that offers that functionality. And so in that sense, if you are somebody like BlackRock and you do have an Ethereum address that you are using to operate, like a multi-billion-dollar tokenized fund or some kind of service like that, you don't want to just be randomly receiving other tokens into that wallet, because it may mean certain legal, financial, regulatory, tax implications or burdens or charges or whatever it may be on your company that you just can't control. Now, many people say on those networks, well, you have the ability to hide stuff in your wallet or whatever it is, but that doesn't matter if the actual tokens themselves are assigned to your address. And so what happened was BlackRock got all set up. They're all gung-ho. And it only took minutes for crypto Twitter to find the Ethereum address tied to this fund that they had launched, and even less time for the wallet to be drowned in low quality meme coins and NFTs, most of which were valued at zero. And so while there's indeed $100 million USDC in BlackRock's Ethereum wallet, which aligns with its SEC filing, there's now more than 100 and probably now more than a bazillion other cryptocurrencies that are definitely not purchased by BlackRock that are alongside those stablecoins. Tokens like Jesus Coin, Kramer Coin, Harry Potter. Oh, they also have some Harry Potter, Obama Sonic Inu. They have Larry Fink and Deranged Token and a bunch of other stuff. Crypto Dick Butts, Goblin Town, all that kind of other stuff. So honestly, to me, like now actually thinking it through, it sounds like they got a pretty based collection there. Pretty, real quick, like what if it happens where BlackRock still has all these tokens in this account and it starts mooning and their $100 million fund like turns into like $1 billion or something? Who knows? That all aside, BlackRock, I guess, has kind of given up, and they're just having a bad time. So what's going on with this? Well, what happened was, first, the Hedera devs X account tweeted out a thread essentially highlighting token association, what went wrong with BlackRock's approach, and why Hedera would be a better alternative from a developer standpoint. Then today, this morning, just before the show, Leemon Baird, the co-founder of Hedera, sent out a tweet quoting the Blockworks, quoting a Blockworks article, which is a new article that was published earlier this week that said, the headline was an opinion piece, BlackRock should have just stuck with Bitcoin. And so I guess this got Leemon ripping and roaring, because this guy never posts to X, and so he has. And Leemon says, when we designed the Hedera network, we wanted to do things differently for Web3. The issue of receiving unwanted tokens is an unfortunate yet expected result of the lack of inflow controls for wallets and accounts on most public blockchains. And so he says this is why we implemented token associations and receiver signature capabilities on Hedera, providing secure and flexible safeguards. So basically what Leemon's saying is, BlackRock, Hedera solves all your problems. And it's true. It's very true. And so what I think the question is, the lingering question is, again, what is preventing these institutions from adopting Hedera? Is it obviously there needs to be integrations built. There needs to be all sorts of things built. This just kind of, reading this news and seeing these types of things, again, the information that was shared with me by the anonymous source, is like, I think about, what was it referred to as? An institutional access point, right? And I'm seeing Leemon tweet about BlackRock. There are dots to connect. There are breadcrumbs to connect. It's not my job in that case. I'm just the messenger on that. But maybe we do want to connect some breadcrumbs on another topic. I think that might be a good idea. And it is a very exciting one. And it's something that kind of just came to me. And I was like, okay, this could be very interesting. There's been a lot of news published recently about Nvidia. And a lot of that news has related to either Hedera Governing Council members, the network, other people building on the network. So it's very interesting in that regard. I would say it's safe to say that it would be a stretch for Nvidia not to know about Hedera. But really quick, if you want to get all the links to the stories we talk about on the show today, hashgraph.news. So Nvidia, what's going on with Nvidia? So basically, I'm just going to rip through a few stories that just kind of brought me to this conclusion. So the first one was a press release that was published on Nvidia's website May last year, that the headline is Dell Technologies and Nvidia introduced Project Helix for secure on-premises generative AI. So Dell Technologies and Nvidia are working on an AI use case. Also, Dell Technologies is a governing council member. A recent story from this year, just from last week, from Hitachi USA, right? Hitachi US specifically. Hitachi is collaborating with Nvidia for generative AI, for driving digital transformation and developing Hitachi IQ, a infrastructure framework for generative AI. Another Hedera Governing Council member, building with Nvidia. And again, I want to be very specific. Dell is not a Hedera Governing Council member. Dell Technologies is a Hedera Governing Council member. Dell is not working with Nvidia. Dell Technologies is working with Nvidia. Hitachi is not a Governing Council member. Hitachi US is a Governing Council member. Hitachi is not working with Nvidia. Hitachi US is working with Nvidia. So just getting specific here. Another headline, this headline coming to us from earlier this year, February, so just a month ago, is ServiceNow, Hugging Face, and Nvidia release new open access LLMs to help developers tap generative AI to build enterprise applications. ServiceNow is another Hedera Governing Council member, and they are working with Nvidia. So right there, and again, getting very specific, Nvidia is working currently with 3 Hedera Governing Council members. That's pretty interesting. We have seen in the past that being a signal potentially for, a Governing Council member. Also, too, again, it's not specifically clear if all of these use cases are leveraging Hedera or Hashgraph or blockchain. But again, it is clear that they are working with Governing Council members. So take that as you will. The other thing is if we want to talk about use cases that are leveraging Hedera and are working with Hedera, is the recent news published, I believe, yesterday by the HBAR Foundation. Headline here: powered by Hedera and Unreal Engine, the team at Astronova have forged further partnerships with Nvidia and Steam, right? Steam being the Valve property, which is kind of like the app store for video games, big company. And they also have their token. Astronova has a token. So again, built on Hedera, gaming use case. This isn't necessarily Nvidia working with a Hedera governing council member, but it's a Hedera gaming use case working with Nvidia. So again, this alone isn't anything to kind of write home about when it comes to Nvidia's place in the Hedera ecosystem, but it does kind of add to that. Further adding to that is like just the fact that Leemon Mance and a lot of other people, and I think more generally the messaging approach of Hedera and the foundation, this and that, is very much focused on AI and those different types of things. Also mentioning, Elon Musk and those related properties much more. We'll talk about the recent First Principles episode in a minute, but I think that as well, like there's just in combination with these specific announcements, there is this overarching theme of Hedera changing in that regard. Whereas in the past, they wouldn't really get this kind of salacious. They wouldn't really directly mention Elon Musk or stuff like that. But now it's like, let me try to phrase this. If Hedera and Nvidia weren't trying to court each other in some aspect on the long term, would they be doing anything different is kind of like my question. And I don't know. And specifically, we haven't seen Nvidia proper talk about Hedera specifically or anything like that. So we're not quite there yet. But when we talk about breadcrumbs, this is the definition of what breadcrumbs are. And the last thing to mention about this that does tie back to the information that was shared with me by the anonymous source was, again, that source mentioned a monster use case coming in Q3 in this ecosystem. And so again, you could wrap this kind of stuff around that. Again, that's just just purely speculation. But again, that's where my brain goes. But that's the Nvidia breadcrumbs. Again, breadcrumbs, rumors, nothing of real substance here, just circumstance, confluence, points of confirmation, and the unignorable fact that 3 active Hedera governing council members are working with Nvidia, and that's just the beginning of how Nvidia is working with people inside the Hedera ecosystem. So anyways, very interesting stuff. If you think about like what would happen if Nvidia got added as a governing council member, or what would happen if Nvidia launched some kind of use case, I think it's pretty clear what kind of use case Nvidia would launch on Hedera. We've seen so many different, like we've seen what Equity Lab has been doing with Hugging Face and just the provenance aspect of AI. Nvidia just launched a new chip, all that kind of stuff. So imagine that kind of technology being built into the hardware or something like that. My brain goes wild with it, but who knows? Again, pure speculation. There was a new Messari crypto report done specifically for Hedera DeFi. I thought this was pretty cool. Now, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I know that the HBAR Foundation does subsidize these reports. I have seen people in the community highlight that. I haven't confirmed that with a source at the HBAR Foundation specifically, but just something to keep in mind is the one thing I will say about Messari is I don't get the sense that they hold punches. If something is not good and the numbers show it, then they're pretty forthcoming with that. So it's definitely doesn't come across to me as like a fluff piece. So key takeaways for me here on this report is Hedera DeFi total value locked is up 146% year to date. So the past quarter, it's up almost 150%, which is impressive. We're at 157 million TVL according to Messari Crypto. That may be small in comparison with other networks, but in regards to sheer just growth. Very impressive. The stablecoin market cap has continued to increase. The supply of USDC on Hedera is up 27%, so at 8 million. I have the sense from the community that that's still a relatively small amount. I know that a big risk in the ecosystem is a lack of liquidity for stablecoins in Hedera, so it's good to see that kind of growth, but I do think we need to like see some very outsized growth in that space. I was happy this report too mentioned, not to endorse these projects, but DaVinci Graph and HBAR Suite, HBAR Suite being a DEX on Hedera and DaVinci Graph being kind of like a DeFi tooling project. I think it's great to see those included in this report because it does show that yes, we have a established DEX, right? Saucer Swap, which, by the way, that team is just doing an absolutely incredible job. But we also have like so many other new pillars of this DeFi ecosystem coming in, and not even to mention, some of these lending and borrowing and Bonzo Finance and Serio Finance, and now we have like 2 oracles with Pyth or Pyth or whatever, and Supra. It's like all of these different things are starting to come in too. So I think that sometimes people in this ecosystem and even outside this ecosystem will see Hedera DeFi as Saucer Swap, which is great, but I do think that the variety of products and services in the DeFi ecosystem on Hedera must grow, and I think it kind of is. So that was really good to see in the report. Daily volume is up 307%. So that basically means the amount of the value of transactions happening daily is up 300%. So that's probably the most impressive metric to me. Yeah, so that's the Messari crypto report. Some good info in there. I'd encourage people to check it out. Again, the link will be on hashgraph.news. Fun tip also too, what people can do. I'll kind of show you this here. This is kind of fun. Is some folks have kind of asked me like, what's an easy way to find an episode of the show if I know the number of the episode? If you go to type in your URL, you just go to like hashgraph.news, and then you can just, let's say you're looking for episode 98. You can just go hashgraph.news/98, and then it'll take you right to that episode and all the info for the episode. So hot tip. A couple more stories, and then we're going to kind of start to wind things down. But this was very exciting to me. So kind of 2 things here, or actually 3 things from Leemon this week, which was that tweet that we just talked about, First Principles episode, which we're going to talk about, but also one thing that I think some folks might miss, and I think this is one kind of for the OGs, one for the OG H-Barbarians. Leemon's going back to Harvard, guys. And he's gonna be giving a talk. And basically this is big because there's many people in the Hedera ecosystem that if you were to ask them, what was the thing that convinced you to buy HBAR or get into the ecosystem? And many people reference a 2017 talk that Leemon gave at Harvard, and where this was before Hedera existed. It was just Swirlds or not even Swirlds Labs. It was just Swirlds, and talking about the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. And it was like this mind-blowing talk that everyone references. And it's kind of like this, it's this meme. It's part of the lore. It's this infamous, it's the Leemon Harvard talk that people often refer to. And so it's this kind of big moment, and seeing this and that, like he's going to be back at Harvard and stuff. It's like, that's pretty dope. That's pretty cool. So I think that, for most people it's like, oh, okay, great. But I think for a lot of like OG H-Barbarians, I think that it's very, very exciting just for the, for the nostalgia factor. I wanted to share also a clip from episode 3 of First Principles. So Leemon and Mance, right, the co-founders of Hedera and all that, they are doing this, like, I guess you call it a podcast series that they started this year. I can't remember. Feels like they're doing an episode a month. It feels like they started it this year. And it's like First Principles. So it's like AI, Hashgraph. This episode is about going to Mars. The next one is going to be about, I think they said, like energy and power. So like they're doing this show on like first principle stuff, like really low level concepts, nothing like kind of like too out there. It's like, let's talk about, what these kind of core concepts are and kind of like, as Mance would say, tease them apart. And this week's, was about going to Mars. They tagged, as you can see here in the tweet, right? They tagged, Elon Musk, right? And I thought this was cool because, I'll share 2 clips here. One's really, really short. But I just thought it was like such a cool moment. Right out the gate, Leemon just disagrees with what Elon says, right? So let's listen into this real quick.
Perhaps colonizing Mars. So, Leemon, Elon Musk, has some really interesting ideas about how we should go about colonizing Mars. Does he have it right or does he have it wrong?
No, what he's described is wrong.
So, like, right out the gate, Leemon's like, no, he's not right. And he kind of implies that, he thinks that Elon is very aware of what actually needs to happen and is just kind of, explaining it in a way that I think is more palatable for the general population. But later on in the episode, Leemon goes into more detail on, like, going to Mars, and what it entails, and the fact that, he says that it isn't SpaceX that's going to make Mars possible. The Tesla bot will. He's like, Leemon's whole point is like, rocket technology is fine. Rocket technology and all that kind of stuff that we have right now can get us to Mars. It's all good. He says the bottleneck is robotics and the ability for robots to mine, refine, create raw materials, build buildings and equipment and cities and all that kind of stuff, repair those things. And he says, like, all it means is just sending a couple robots up to Mars and having them build everything out. So he's like, it's actually the robots that are the most important aspect of this. So I'd encourage anyone to watch this episode of First Principles. It's wild, but I think this clip here is the best way to illustrate like how kind of like wild this conversation is. I'm just going to play this 2 minutes for people. I found it's just crazy. And reminder, this is only 5.5 minutes into the episode. For what they're talking about here. So let's listen in.
Discovered it, so we have to go dig and try to find all that stuff. I would see that as one of the very critical materials when we first get there. In fact, a lot of the pounds of what we send initially, kilograms, is going to have to be uranium, I think.
You have to have enough raw materials there in order to find the raw materials that are going to be needed.
True. And if all you want is carbon and iron, well, we can probably find that very fast. But if you also need uranium, it may take longer to find that. And so I think someone asked me once about writing a science fiction story on Mars. And I said, one of the things you might have them all fighting over is energy, because maybe when they discover that uranium is very rare. And then that's the key thing you need, the bottleneck of civilization. But I expect probably it's not all that rare. You can probably find uranium, but we haven't tried yet. So that'll be really important. Unless we get fusion, we should do one of these things, these first principles on energy. It is possible that we will see fusion actually become practical. And if that happens, and if Martian water has a little bit of deuterium in it, which it almost certainly does, then we're set. We have endless energy, and the robots can build these reactors easily, and we'll be fine. But that's still a question. We should have another one on energy.
There have been some interesting experiments recently on that.
Really interesting. This 2024, which could be a really interesting year in fusion. But we'll see. But failing that, we use uranium, we ship it from Earth originally, and then eventually we mine it locally.
Okay. And so then to just summarize, we send the robots with an initial payload so that they can do the work they need to do to find other raw materials, mine other raw materials. They then end up building the cities, and then we just show up and move in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at some point late in the game, we send them seeds, and then they can have gardens, and you can have farms. Maybe we send them bacteria. Solar Foods is doing interesting things with food from bacteria. It's fascinating. So it's anyway. We have that, and then they can also build. We could send livestock as well, and they could have herds also if you wanted to do that.
Like basically, it's like, again, that's 6 minutes into the episode, just like going so far out there. And it's one of those things that I loved watching it because it's like, okay, this is Dr. Leemon Baird. He's going to get us to Mars, guys. It was just a wild episode. So I'm enjoying the first principle stuff. Also too, like, I got to say real quick, people have been knocking Mance in that interview, like saying like, oh, Leemon's a genius. And like Mance doesn't know anything. It's like, I think the dynamic of the first principle show is like Mance is kind of like the interviewer. I don't think the case is like Mance doesn't know what Leemon knows. I think Mance is, with these kinds of videos, you have to have someone guiding the conversation. I don't think Leemon is the guy to guide the conversation. He's like so all over the map. So I don't get the impression that Mance doesn't know this stuff. I think it's more like Mance is kind of like the interviewer in a way. So in defense of Mance, okay, so really quick, we're going to start wrapping things up. I appreciate everyone listening, like everyone tuning in on Spaces. So good to see everybody. Lots of stuff that we talked about this week. One thing I want to remind people of is I have been doing clips of the show. This is a big piece of feedback that people have given me about the show. People both really enjoy the long format, especially when there's interviews and stuff. But what people also want is they want like the clips of the major moments in the show, the 10-minute clip, the 20-minute clip of this topic or that topic. So what I have been doing, and more so going forward, is at least, 3, 4, 5, however many clips that hit on particular things for the show. After the show comes out, those, again, video clips where you can see me and my computer screen and stuff, those coming out throughout the days following the release of the show after the live show. So on YouTube, you can actually go search Hashgraph Enthusiast Clips. There's a playlist. There's 18 really great clips in there now. Go and check it out. And there's all sorts of different stuff. And there's going to be plenty more published on that playlist soon. So go check it out. I guess, can you subscribe to a playlist? I don't know. Subscribe to me on YouTube. I guess you can't subscribe to a playlist. Also, tomorrow at noon Eastern, I'm going to be on the Hedera Discord community call. So make sure to tune in for that. There's going to be some folks that are sharing updates from the ecosystem and their projects and stuff. I will be on the call, sharing updates from the Hashgraph NFT working group, the Hashgraph DeFi Alliance, Hashgraph Online, the Hashgraph DAO working group, the HBAR Foundry, and the Wallet Connect working group. So these multi-year community organized groups that I help for operations with them all. They've got stuff going on that they'd like the community to know about. And I'm just going to share some quick updates with the community tomorrow on the Hedera official Discord, on the Hedera Discord community call. It should be a good time. And lots of other folks sharing info as well. So definitely check that out. I think there's going to be some good like developer info and stuff too, which will be important. So if you're interested in Hedera things, tune into that. Wow. Okay. So this has been quite a show. Let's try to button it up here. So this week, thinking big, I think going into the episode today, it's funny. It's so funny with this show. I'll get everything laid out. I will write all my notes. You'll see me when I start the spaces. I'm like still like, typing away. And I have a really solid idea of what I want to talk about, and kind of what I think needs to be communicated. But every episode, after actually talking through all the news stories and, presenting them and bundling things up, I just feel like I learned so much new stuff. And when I get to the end of the show, I like the stuff I've written down, like isn't even relevant anymore. It's like, it's actually after really seriously looking at this stuff over this, hour, however long it is doing the show, it just kind of changes my perspective. And I think the big thing here is like, the question is, should we be thinking bigger? And I think, the answer is yes. I think that the bear market, burnout, confusion, drama, all that kind of stuff, I think that those things can over time get you thinking, smaller, right? Surviving, not thriving, right? I think that there have been, and I'm talking about myself personally and also in my own initiatives, is like, when you have a body that is out in the freezing cold, the blood flows away from the extremities to the core to like preserve the heart and the organs, and the body's kind of like, well, so what if I lose a foot? That's kind of where we've been at for the last, at least year, 2 years. This ecosystem, and this isn't just the Hedera ecosystem. Again, this is crypto more broadly. That's kind of been the vibe of like, preserve the internal organs, and what happens. And we've seen a lot of great projects and a lot of great people, both in and outside of Hedera, leave the ecosystem because they got to pay rent or whatever it is. And we've also seen like major banks fail and all this kind of stuff. And it gets me asking, like, is now the time to think bigger? I think it is. I think that things are warming up. And I think it's really important to start taking action before you need to. And I think what I'm taking away from this episode is, I need to start thinking bigger. And what that means is not maybe thinking more abstract, but I think it's about taking time to actually digest what's happened. And kind of like getting out of heads down mode a little bit and kind of taking a moment to kind of be like, where exactly are we? Where did we arrive? We survived, we're here. A lot of great stuff has been built, but what does it all mean? Like, how does it all connect? Stepping outside of ourselves a little bit. And so I think thinking bigger requires, a lot of collaboration. I was so blown away and so overjoyed, quite frankly, to see Hashpack and Kabila working together on furthering development of the Wallet Connect initiative. That's just incredible to see more of that. That's thinking big stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that I think we need to see in the ecosystem. And it doesn't require enterprise adoption. It doesn't require funding. It doesn't require stuff like that. All it requires is thinking bigger. And I think that's a huge risk, but I think one that should be taken right now is, what if a project wasn't a competitor? What if they were a peer? Thinking big. I think that's what thinking big is about. And maybe it's thinking deeply too, right? It's exiting out of survival mode and getting into, I'm going to thrive mode. I'm going to enjoy mode. I'm going to have fun mode. I'm going to build mode. We've talked about this on the show in the past, but I think this is just the last call of, check yourself at the door, right? It's time, I think, to shed the bear market vibe. It's time to think big, and I'm saying this, like, literally just realizing this myself now in real time, live on Spaces every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, Hashgraph enthusiasts, hosted by myself, Brandon Davenport, at itsbrandond. We talked about a lot on the show. Thank you for supporters of the show. I could not do it without you. As I said before, you literally just send HBAR or like whatever to an address, and then I sell that stuff and I buy stuff that I need for the show, and the show gets better and bigger. And I very much enjoy it, and I'm forever grateful to the community. I love doing this stuff, and it's still weird here for folks listening on Spaces. Wait, here's the setup here. I'm just doing the old show. Got my notes. Got the equipment here. Here's the, can I turn my camera live? I can't. That's the other thing is I can't turn the camera live on Spaces. But there's the equipment there. This is what the video version doesn't see. This is the behind the scenes look. Good stuff. Well, this has been episode 118. That feels crazy to say still. And again, huge thank you to supporters, listeners of the show. I'd encourage anyone here listening live on Spaces right now, like, hit each other's profile pictures, send each other DMs, ask people what's new, what's going on, what's up. And interested to hear thoughts on what was shared today. Appreciate you all. Hella future. Goodbye, past.
Thanks for listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiast Show, hosted by Brandon Davenport.
Listen to past episodes and support the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR.
That's my dog right there.